Welcome back. You're still watching Business Lunch on CNBC TV 18. It's still holding up quite well, actually. So the market is at the high point of trade right now. And it's some of these mid-cap IT names that have reversed their losses after the rupee has erased its gains. So they move, in opposite directions, as we know. NIT Tech, Mindtree, all of these stocks are doing pretty well in trade today. But even the Tata Group stocks, whether it's Tata Motors, Titan, TCS, all these stocks are topping the charts this afternoon. Well, let's move on and let's talk about, all right, the RBI governor is addressing the media, so let's listen in.
Bank of India, although some of you were trying to contact me and trying to reach me, but I was not able to meet all of you. That time there was no time, and then since yesterday also I have been receiving text messages from several of you wanting to meet me. So therefore I thought let me have this opportunity mainly to sort of have this kind of chit chat, as you can say, with all of you. Now let me again mention very clearly, and as I did the other day in Mumbai, that when I met your colleagues in Mumbai, that I do not propose to make any major policy announcements or anything of that sort. The main idea was to just meet you and just have a chit chat and use the opportunity also of mentioning a few points. Today I had a meeting with the MSME associations earlier today, and the purpose was mainly to interact and get their viewpoint about the current state of the functioning of the MSMEs and the implementation of the restructuring scheme which the Reserve Bank has announced earlier. You are aware about the restructuring scheme which has been announced, and also the MSMEs do have other issues relating to their functioning, some of which are in the domain of Reserve Bank, most of which is in the domain of the government and in the domain of the banks so far as their commercial functioning is concerned. So it was a very good interaction. I had a 2-hour interaction with the MSMEs, and we have noted down the points which were made by them, and we will examine them internally. While issuing the MSME circular also, we have pointed out in the circular, we have said that the banks have been asked to look at the viability of individual MSMEs before making them applicable to the individual MSMEs. The effort is to, of course, see that maximum number of units do get the benefit, but then again, while extending the benefit, the viability aspect also has to be considered, because without going into the viability aspect, obviously it would not be possible to implement a restructuring scheme. So the banks have been tasked to place the matter before their board and come out with guidelines to examine the viability of individual proposals and also the monitoring of the performance of such restructured assets and units. So we do hope that the banks and the MSME units will work together to see that the scheme is implemented in letter and spirit, in a manner that maximum units do benefit, and also in a manner that the required principles of viability, etc., are also examined. The second point I would like to mention is that tomorrow I am meeting the NBFCs in Mumbai, and the representatives of the NBFCs will meet me and my colleagues in Mumbai. We will have a detailed interaction. And over the last several months, you would be aware that there has been a lot of discussion and a lot of views and points of view have been expressed about the issue of liquidity which is faced by the NBFCs. So tomorrow's meeting, we will utilize the opportunity to get a perspective from the NBFCs. Earlier, I have had personally meetings with the public sector and private sector banks. I also had a very detailed meeting separately with the cooperative banks, because the issues and the problems of cooperative sector are different from the commercial banks or the scheduled commercial banks, as you know them. So I'm looking forward to our interaction with the NBFCs and try to understand their perspective on various issues. Thirdly, I would like to mention that the liquidity issue has been mentioned time and again. I have got several inputs over the last almost about a month that I assume charge in Reserve Bank. I have had interaction with several stakeholders, with several players, with banks, with both public and private sector banks, and we have a sense of the current liquidity situation. And we have already, after I took over, we have announced, the Reserve Bank has announced, OMO of, additional OMO of 60,000 crores. That is the OMO open market operations. That was increased by 10,000 crores in the month of December, and for January we have announced OMO operation, that is open market operations of 50,000 crores. So we do believe that the liquidity requirement of the economy and financial institutions are, to a great extent they are met. Now, while dealing with the issue of liquidity, I would also like to say that this is something which the Reserve Bank is constantly monitoring and will take steps whenever there is a need to deal with the liquidity deficit if it is noticed. At the same time, I must also add that the Reserve Bank would not like a situation where liquidity becomes a kind of a loose money. Any infusion of liquidity will have to be very carefully considered and has to be need-based. So therefore, the caution and care has to be exercised by the Reserve Bank of India so that excess liquidity, which sometimes has certain adverse consequences, that is not created. But I can mention that the liquidity needs of the economy are regularly, constantly being monitored, and whatever steps are required, it will be taken. We have, over the last 1 month or so, also taken other decisions. You are aware, the Reserve Bank has constituted a committee to study the economic capital framework of the Reserve Bank under the chairmanship of Dr. Bimal Jalan, and we have Dr. Rakesh Mohan as its vice chairman, and it has got other eminent members, other eminent persons who are its members. Similarly, we have also constituted a committee to study the issues and matters relating to the MSMEs under the chairmanship of former chairman of the SEBI, that is Sri UK Sinha. That committee has also just last week been constituted. And I would just conclude by saying that the current focus of the bank is, of course, all aspects where RBI is required to focus are very much on the table, and we are focusing on them. But one issue which engages our attention almost on a daily basis is the state of the NPAs and the health of public sector banks. Our financial stability report and the trends in Indian banking, both these reports, we have given out the figures which were released in the last week of December, and there is definitely improvement noticed in reduction of the NPA levels of the banks as a whole and the public sectors in particular. There is considerable amount of improvement, but the improvements will have to be sustained if the banks have to fulfill their responsibilities, and if the banks have to become, some of the banks again have to become healthy. We are also looking at, in consultation with the various stakeholders, we are also looking at what kind of governance reforms can be brought about in the working of the banks without, again, let me say that we do not want to create a framework which imposes restrictions that restrict or that throttle the functioning of the banks. So without throttling, without in any manner sort of putting impediments on the working of the banks, allowing them sufficient commercial flexibility and creating an environment not only come out of the NPA but also do grow. We do realize that governance reforms are an important component of the revival of the public sector banks. Several steps have been taken, I must mention, several steps have been taken by the Reserve Bank of India. Several steps have been taken by the Government of India, but there is still there are some areas which are engaging our attention. So I will stop here, and You will excuse me, I have a flight to catch, so I'll take very few questions. I'll just take very few questions. I'll just come.
So there have been reports that the RBI is likely to pay the government interim dividend about 30 to 40,000 crores this year. So how much truth is there to that report?
Well, there have been reports, I also read about it. As and when RBI takes any decision on any matter, you will come to know about it. You will come to know about it.
After your 2-hour meeting with MSME, what is the basic sense you are taking the condition of MSME? What's the RBI?
No, I think the mood is certainly quite confident. The mood among the MSMEs is certainly quite confident, and I think they are looking forward. Many of the points which they mentioned relate to, basically they lie in the domain of the government. And the Secretary MSME Ministry also participated in the meeting. The Deputy Governor Reserve Bank also participated in the meeting. But mood looks fairly confident. Yes, please. I'll come slowly. Yeah.
So just on a different issue, we're getting to hear that probably the next meeting of the Board of Financial Supervision, if there is a chance, and possibly the PCA framework has been under discussion for some time, this is going to go forward. The government recently has decided to infuse around 41,000 crores worth of additional recap bonds in PSPs. Anything further that we can expect in terms
Well, as I said here, as and when Reserve Bank takes any decision on any issue, you will come to know about it. I cannot jump the gun and prejudge the issues. Yes, please. I'll come. Yeah.
Dr. In addition to the first question, is there a demand from the government regarding interim dividends? Have you got any intimation from the government? And if yes, what is the view that the RBI has taken at this time?
No, I think I explained that. As and when RBI, a lot of correspondence goes on between the government and the Reserve Bank. A lot of discussions do take place. Now, whether there is an individual letter or not, that is not really relevant. But I can tell you that as and when a decision is taken, Reserve Bank will not delay announcing the decision. Yes, please. I'll come.
क्या गवर्नमेंट ने आपको ये कहा है कि आप बैंक्स को एक टारगेट दें कि वो कब तक एनपीए को लेकर जो आपने अभी बात करी है कि वो एनपीए से बाहर है, इसको लेकर क्या कोई टारगेट दिया जाए?
नहीं जी, मैं बिल्कुल साफ कहना चाहता हूँ, ऐसा कोई टारगेट रिजर्व बैंक को नहीं दिया गया है। और मैंने जैसा मैंने कहा था मेरे फर्स्ट प्रेस कॉन्फ्रेंस जो कि पिछले महीने 12 दिसंबर को मैंने किया था, इमीडिएटली आफ्टर टेकिंग ओवर, गवर्नमेंट से ऐसा कोई सुझाव नहीं आया है। कई सारे मुद्दे हैं जिसके ऊपर गवर्नमेंट और रिजर्व बैंक का डिस्कशंस चलते रहते हैं, बट फाइनल डिसीजन जो होता है वो रिजर्व बैंक टेक द फाइनल डिसीजन ऑन मैटर्स विच आर इन इट्स ओन डोमेन आफ्टर कंसिडरिंग ऑल द एस्पेक्ट्स। सो रिजर्व बैंक will listen to everybody, Reserve Bank will interact with everybody including the government, but the final decision will be taken by the Reserve Bank in an objective manner to the best of its judgment.
You have again brought in the MSME restructure scheme. This is like after the February circular where NPAs were like one day now. Do you think it's a retrograde step in some sense that RBI is backing down on the whole NPA?
You see, it's a value judgment. I don't want to go into a value judgment whether it is retrograde or progressive. These are adjectives. I don't want to go into that. We examined the situation very carefully, and as the press note which was released that day, it said very clearly that the MSMEs have an important role in the economy, and considering the current situation, Reserve Bank, in its wisdom, after considering all aspects, thought it prudent in the overall interest of the economy, in the interest of the banks, in the interest of the MSMEs to come out with those guidelines. Arup, yeah.
Sir, one issue that you have inherited from your predecessors is the issue of pension of the RBI employees. So how do you plan to go about dealing with that? And secondly, how much will you pay the government before March?
Well, the second point, how much we will pay as and when a decision is taken, that is a decision which has to be taken by the board, and as and when any decision for that matter is taken, you will come to know. And pension, have you joined the Reserve Bank or something? Yeah, Lakshman, please. Yeah. I'll come.
अभी पार्लियामेंट रिप्लाई के मुताबिक 37,000 करोड़ रुपए का इन प्रिंसिपल अप्रूवल हुआ, लेकिन सिर्फ 14,000 करोड़ रुपए डिस्पर्स हुआ। इन प्रिंसिपल अप्रूवल डिस्पर्समेंट में 50% से ज्यादा चांस है, इसको कैसे दूर करेंगे? और सेकंड चीज नकदी को लेकर के,
किसको?
नकदी लिक्विडिटी को लेकर, लिक्विडिटी की समस्या आपके हिसाब से क्या पूरे सिस्टम में है या फिर कुछ चुनिंदा सेक्टर में?
इसी जो पहला पॉइंट आपने कहा अबाउट दिस प्रधानमंत्री जी का जो अनाउंसमेंट था, वो आई थिंक द कंसर्न मिनिस्ट्री जो है उसको मॉनिटर कर रहे हैं रेगुलरली, तो उसके बारे में मैं आई डोंट थिंक इट इज़ आई डोंट हैव द डिटेल्स ऑल्सो, सो इट विल नॉट बी करेक्ट ऑन माई पार्ट। जो कंसर्न मिनिस्ट्री है MSME मिनिस्ट्री और फाइनेंस मिनिस्ट्री का जो फाइनेंशियल सर्विसेज डिपार्टमेंट है वो उसको मॉनिटर कर रहे हैं, मेरे को जितना जानकारी है। और दूसरा क्वेश्चन आपका था, हाँ लिक्विडिटी जो है, देखिए मैं इसमें सिर्फ यही कहना चाहता हूं कि वी आर कॉन्स्टेंटली मॉनिटरिंग। कोई सेक्टर आई डोंट वांट टू मेंशन बिकॉज किसी भी सेक्टर यहाँ पे मेंशन करना कि देयर सरप्लस और देयर दिस इज अ मार्केट रिलेटेड इंफॉर्मेशन, सो देयरफॉर एनीथिंग आई से ऑन दिस मैटर ड्यूरिंग मार्केट आवर्स has other implications, so I will refrain. Ruchi, yeah.
The Parliamentary Standing Committee on Finance, sir, in one of their reports have said that the norms for higher capital adequacy for PSU banks is an unwarranted step. The government has been asking for it for a very long time, that these norms be brought down. What's the view that the RBI?
No, we are examining the. We have got a copy of the report submitted by the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Finance to the Parliament. We are going through it. We are going through it.
What is your overall assessment on the economy, looking at the fall in oil prices and current inflation?
I think overall sense of economy के बारे में बात करेंगे. So I think I'll conclude. Yeah, Deepika, yeah. आ रहा हूँ.
There have been announcements on farm loan waivers by various states, and it's expected that the centre may also come up with something. How do you view these farm loan waivers?
You see, it is all related to the fiscal space that the state governments have. Elected governments have, the elected governments have the constitutional mandate to take decisions with regard to their finance. But every state government, I must mention, before taking decisions on any kind of farm loan waivers, they have to very carefully examine their fiscal space, and if there is fiscal space, it's for the government to decide, but it is also for the governments, individual governments, to examine whether they have the fiscal space to meet the requirements and release the money to the banks immediately then and there. But secondly, I would like to say that any generalized kind of write-off, it's not a new point I am saying, any generalized kind of write-off obviously has adverse effect on the credit culture and future credit behavior of the of the borrowers. Yeah. Sorry? आई थिंक उसके बारे में सरकार ने फाइनेंस मिनिस्ट्री इकोनॉमिक अफेयर्स डिपार्टमेंट ने क्लैरिफिकेशन दे दिया है, तो उसके आगे और मैं कुछ नहीं कहना चाहूँगा. आई थिंक आप मेरे को नहीं मेरे को यू विल हैव टू एक्सक्यूज मी, आई हैव अ फ्लाइट टू टेक. थैंक यू वेरी मच. आई विल अगेन मीट ऑल ऑफ यू.
इस तरह के रिपोर्ट्स आ रहे हैं कि RBI मुद्रा लोन के ऊपर भी काफी चिंतित है. क्या NPA बढ़ रहे हैं मुद्रा लोन पे? और दूसरा कि क्या इस वर्ष के आखिर तक कुछ बैंक जो PCA में है वो बाहर आ सकते हैं?
ये जब इसी बारे में जब कोई भी डिसीजन लिया जाएगा आपको बताएंगे. सिद्धार्थ,
and there were a lot of differences, especially on two issues: economic capital pressure as well as the governance reform being proposed by the government. How has been your relationship in last almost a month? Your company?
I think I have replied to this question on the first day of my press conference. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, so that was RBI Governor Shaktikanta Das in that press meeting. A very big takeaway is on the liquidity situation. In fact, he did say that the OMOs that have been done by the RBI address most of the liquidity concerns, but they will continue to monitor it, but also make sure that it doesn't lead to excess liquidity. Let's take it straight across to Lata to understand what we make of the comments coming in and how will market really read into it, Lata?
No, I think the governor has not given away anything. If anything, he has warned that they will not get into an excess liquidity situation, because there were widespread fears that, the RBI is perhaps being under pressure because of the MSME, the problems in the NBFC sector to provide more liquidity. He has not given away anything by way of a special window of liquidity to NBFC, not given away anything by way of, even more liquidity to the bond markets. So it does look, and this concern that liquidity should not reach an excess situation will also be something that, a lot of inflation hawks will be worried about. They did not want a situation of excessive liquidity. We have guests with us, R. Shivakumar of Axis Mutual Fund, the fixed income fund manager at Axis Mutual Fund with us. Shivakumar, what have you made of all the statements that the governor said on liquidity?
I think there is no change as far as we see in the RBI's policy on liquidity, especially the fact that they continue to use OMOs for tracking or bringing to neutral what they call the durable needs of the system. So there are two parts to this. One is obviously do not expect RBI to react to every change in liquidity with OMOs. And more importantly, do not just expect RBI to add enough OMOs so as the system moves into surplus. They are quite clear that they do not want excess liquidity in the system.
Okay. Just stay on, Shiva, for a minute. We have Anant Narayan also with us. Anant, the entire gamut of statements made didn't give away anything by way of PCA or whether the norms will be reduced. In fact, when he was asked about the fiscal munificence of states, he said that governments ought to only promise what they can deliver, looking at their fiscal elbow room. What did you make of the entire complex of statements?
Well, Lata, I didn't catch all of the statements, but whatever I heard on liquidity and on fiscal was frankly heartening. You have to remember that this governor comes in sadly under a bit of a cloud, given the previous governor resigned under pressure from the government. So one is always afraid that there might be liquidity awash or the purse strings loosened more than is required. I personally found his statements on liquidity quite reassuring. It kind of toes the old RBI line. It makes a difference between banking liquidity, which frankly is ample, given banks are sitting on so much of excess government securities, and the fact that certain NBFCs and HFCs might not be getting liquidity to the extent they want. And the two are completely different issues. And I think he was echoing that particular statement. Okay. So I really took heart from his statement that he doesn't want the system to be awash in liquidity, which is something which is not good for financial stability. Okay. And that should give us some comfort. Okay.
Shivakumar, he didn't mention anything about any special line of credit to NBFCs. He only said that he's going to meet NBFC industry heads tomorrow. Is that how will the market receive that? Is that received negatively? Was there any expectation at all that something will be given to NBFCs?
I think the broader picture is that they are listening to all the participants. So in case after meeting NBFCs, they figure out that there needs to be something specific, I'm sure RBI will look at it. But more importantly, most of the NBFCs now are able to access the markets. And I think that freeze which we saw in, let's say, back in September and October seems to have eased considerably. So I think they may not need any emergency line of liquidity right now, but perhaps RBI could look at doing something more durable, like, for example, altering the ALM norms or, change the funding norms for NBFCs, which may make these kind of tight liquidity conditions less probable in the future.
Okay. Any other key takeaways other than liquidity for you, Shivakumar?
No, I think not. I think the point that Anand mentioned earlier about the risk of, kind of debt waivers impacting credit culture is something worth watching. But obviously, it doesn't affect the mutual fund industry as much or the capital markets directly as much, except through the fiscal channel. So it's something which we will keep watching to see if there are more evidence or if there's a more chance of fiscal slippage, either at the center or the state going forward. Okay.
Incidentally, since we have you with us, why is the yield at 7.5? That's something like a 1-month high, isn't it? Or even more.
And I think clearly the fiscal worries have come front and center. I think in our last conversation, I did make the point that, people had gotten too optimistic on inflation and OMOs, and that as we get closer to the budget, the mood will shift towards the fiscal, and the disappointment on GST collections and the worries that there might be some new populist measures in the next budget, I think are keeping yields elevated. My expectation is that markets could remain under some pressure for some time.
Okay. Yes, we did get the net direct tax collections numbers. They are at 13.5% higher than previous year. and the gross collections are 14% higher than last year. Whereas if you compare the budgeted estimate with last year's actuals, the budget's asking rate is actually 16%. So, you know, we need a little bit of a catch-up even on direct taxes. Indirect taxes, we already know, are running a reasonable deficit because of the GST collections coming way below 1 lakh crore. Anand, any final observations on what the governor said?
I think the lens will continue to remain on the RBI and the government for now. Look, lots of worries. I think I agree with Shivkumar that the issues of liquidity on the NBFCs is doused for now. But the longer-term concerns about the asset quality and the need for an eventual asset quality review for NBFCs as well cannot be put aside for too long. And we probably need stronger norms on balance sheet risk management, etc. as well. On the fisc, the numbers are looking terrible. The total numbers until October indicate that in fact, it's November, 8-month numbers indicate a shortfall of about 1% of GDP on just the revenue collection. And we are not even taking into account the slippage in expenses. Plus, of course, this competitive populism which has come in now, which might see some large-scale, farm relief or universal basic income and stuff like that. So there will be a lot of eyes again on what the RBI does to, in the wake of what looks like fiscal profligacy. There'll be a lot of eyes on what the committee eventually decides on the payment to the RBI, from the RBI's reserves to the government. All of these are going to be contentious issues at a time when fiscal is not looking good. So I expect the markets to remain nervous and a lot of unanswered questions for which the governor will be watched very, very carefully.
Okay. Thank you very much, Anant, for joining us. Well, for me, the key takeaway is that, there is this famous statement that Governor Subbarao made in his autobiography that when an IAS officer takes the flight from Delhi to Mumbai to join as the Reserve Bank governor, something changes in that flight and he, assumes a totally different outlook on liquidity, on inflation, on fisc. And Governor Shaktikanta Das seemed to show exactly those signs. Very careful on liquidity, not giving away anything by way of easing of PCA norms, saying that yes, the NPA situation has improved, but we would like governance to improve in banks without restricting their growth, but not saying anything in terms of loosening controls on banks, as well not giving away anything by way of a special credit to NBFCs. Watchfulness on the fisc and watchfulness on liquidity. Two things that were not there in his first press conference are clearly there now. He's speaking much more like an RBI man at this juncture. And that's why you saw the bond yields dip to 7.48 and go back to 7.49 or 7.5. Clearly, Governor not sounding at all dovish, merely reiterating. But the important point was, as Anand pointed out, given his background, he is expected to make dovish noises. And he didn't do that. He sounded more like an RBI man. And that perhaps will be very heartwarming for those who want all these parameters to be carefully watched by the Reserve Bank. Net, no change at all in the bond yield as of now. Back to you, Anisha.
Okay, Lata, thank you so much for putting that in perspective. So important statements coming out of the RBI governor as far as liquidity is concerned. They are talking about the fact that if the economy needs excess liquidity, they would look at additional measures. But as of now, they do not want any loose liquidity to really come into the markets. As far as the market is concerned, well, the Nifty is sitting at around 10,800. We are off the day's high by around 30-40 points. And in the last few minutes, we had seen a bit of a knockoff when it comes to the Nifty. The Bank Nifty is sitting with a gain of around 230 points. As those statements were coming in, we did see a reaction in the Bank Nifty, but it continues to be stable around the 27,424 mark, and Nifty IT is the one that is gaining higher. But on that note, it's a goodbye on this session of Business Lunch. We'll keep with the markets and the stock-specific action on the other side.